explaining the TonUino project. This is an English DIY. This is part 104, where I explain to you how to make the TonUino. This tutorial is going to have 4 parts. The part 1 is about the physical parts. Part 2 is going over the code, the firmware, getting the MP3 folder all together, and the modifications that we'll make to the code. The part 3 tutorial is going to be putting it together, and part 4 is enjoying. And this is the first tutorial. The first thing I'm going to talk about is your options for cases. You have cardboard, plastic, or wood. Obviously, different skill levels. The plastic cases are great. You can use the 12-quart boxes, the shoe boxes, a plastic lunch box, or a toolbox. The toolbox from the Dollar Tree is going to be your cheapest option. And carefully, you could use an X-Acto knife to cut it, so you don't need any drills or drill bits or anything like that. The other option, it's a little bit more expensive than $1 for a plastic box, but it looks really nice and is really easy to cut, is a stiff cardboard box meant for reusing. The smallest cube you're going to want would be a 5x5 cube. You'll still be able to fit everything in. And it'll still look really, really nice. These can be found at, sometimes you can find the ones big enough at the dollar store during Christmas, which you can either paper over or paint on. And you can also find these at Hallmark on sale. Sometimes they go on clearance for a couple of bucks. My preference is making a wood case. Of course, I have some wood tools to use. The smallest box works really great. Things are a little bit tight on the inside, but not terribly. You can use the medium-sized box, but the smallest one is large enough. You need all sorts of tools, however, to do this. You need to make sure you have a drill, sandpaper, drill bits, and that kind of thing in order to do woodworking. So if you have the woodworking tools, it's a great option. If not, totally not necessary. So our cost so far is between $1 and $10. The Hobby Lobby box is $7. You mean you could buy more hefty plastic, but between $1 and $10, you probably don't want to spend more than $10 on your box. And if this is your first time, keep it simple. Try to just use a box that you can easily cut or open somehow. So next we're discussing the hardware, what you need to use and buy for hardware. Hardware is the actual physical electronic components that you're going to be putting in your box. First of all, we need an Arduino Uno. Arduinos are actually pretty expensive. They're $25 to $30 each. There's no reason why you wouldn't want to buy a knockoff. The clones and the knockoffs work just fine. They're really great. And clones are usually under $10, so you save a lot of money there. There will be libraries to download, but it's not actually too hard. Then you want to get your RFID reader. Your RFID reader is going to be the thing that's actually reading your cards. It's going to be giving you the ability to make this player quite nifty. One of the things that you want to make note of when you purchase your reader is the frequency. There are many popular frequencies for RFID readers that do different things, and I recommend using the 13.56 megahertz because that is the most readily available cards, tags, and stickers. So you have the most ability to be flexible with how you do your stuff if you use the 13.56 megahertz. It's also compatible with amiibos. So if you have amiibos lying around, you can actually make your music player play a song when you put your amiibo on. The DF mini player is where you're going to store the actual songs. This is where you put your SD card in, and you just want to make sure if you buy a real cheap one, you check the soldering pins. It seems like a common problem with these is that the soldering was bad. If the soldering's bad, it's pretty easy to return it to eBay. Your next item is a 3-inch speaker, 4 ohms, 3 watts. This 3-inch speaker is probably your kind of sweet spot as far as how your device is going to sound versus large speakers. The larger the speaker, generally, the better a device sounds. You could get a smaller speaker, but it's not going to sound as good. So go with the 3-inch speaker for this build. Now you'll also need 5 arcade buttons. The arcade buttons come in unlit and lit. They come in convex and concave. The simplest thing to do, and they come in many, many colors and options, is use the unlit plastic buttons. I'll go over lighting the buttons for a little bit later. The clear buttons are able to light up. They still look pretty unlit, so it's all up to you. They don't add that much expense to add the LED buttons in general, unless you're buying a pack of buttons together. You're not really reducing much cost by opting for the solid plastic buttons. Then you're going to want some DuPont cables. This is how you string everything together, unless you want to solder. And soldering everything together is a perfectly viable option. It's just a little bit difficult for a beginner. You're going to want at least 40 cables with a variety of male to female, male to male, and female to female. For beginners, I definitely say the longer the better, because then you can organize your cables and thoughts a little bit easier because they're long, and you can stretch things out and space things out, and it always helps me. The other thing that you're going to want to do is the Spade connectors. This is going to prevent you from really needing to do any soldering. Most Spade connectors come in a box, a set with Spade connectors, heat shrink tubing, and they all have various sizes. You're going to need at least 10 for your 2.8 millimeter buttons. If you are going to be using LED buttons, you're going to need at least 20. But as you can see here, this is a $5 set, and you'll have no problem making sure you have everything you need. For your speaker, I believe you're going to either need 4 or 6 millimeter. It's really going to depend on what the speaker looks like in the back, and I'll tell you how to get that all connected later. So let's review our costs so far. The Arduino clone is, and these are basically US shippers, and I'll go into that later. And these are also kind of like, I was just looking at what's easily found, not the cheapest price. So your Arduino clone is usually around $8. I was seeing some at $7, but you're going to want to spend about $8. Your RFID reader between 6 and 8. Your DF mini player, again, 6 and 8. Your speaker between 6 and 8. Your arcade buttons are going to be between $4 and $8, depending on if you buy a put together pack or if you buy a pack that is, or if you buy them individually. But even that, you're going to just want to kind of search around, check. I was able to get lit up ones for $1 each plus $3 shipping, so that put my total at $8 for lit up buttons, and I got to pick the colors that I wanted. The DuPont cables, you could buy a huge bag for $5, and you may go more than that. That's fine. They're always handy to have around if you're getting into electronics. And then your Spade connectors, $5 for a box, great to have around. Very, very useful, well worth it, but you're only going to need a few for this project. So here is the parts that can be reused and really have a variable price because it's going to depend on what you choose. You can always plug your device into the wall. That's going to basically eliminate the battery whatsoever. I think that having a battery pack is a great idea. It gives you a lot of life and gives you a lot of ability to hand your device off to kids and then have them run around the room without a problem. So the battery pack, you're going to want a 2.1 amp output. Really, you're going to only need about 1 amp output, but it's better if you get a battery that has more capability. The more capability, the longer your battery is going to last when you're playing with it, and the longer lifetime your battery is going to have in general. The next thing you want to look at is your micro SD card. A lot of people who use these in their phones have them hanging around all over the place. You're not going to want to use a card bigger than 32 gigs. You could use a card as small as 4 gigs. The problem with a 4 gig card is it is super tiny and you can't store a lot of music and other things on it, or music and really songs, MP3s. So you try to aim for a 16 or 32 gig card. Either one will give you many, many hours of playback. The other consumable item, as we discussed before when we were talking about the RFID reader, is the RFID chips. You have stickers, chips, or some people call them tags, and these are all 3 different ways to get your music player to play songs. And so if you wanted to play a song, you're going to need this. The stickers are really cool if you want to prompt your reader by figurines. You can just stick a sticker onto a figurine, or if you have something else that you want to run by your reader. I mean, you could use rocks, you could have stickered rocks, you could have stickered things around the house, and it would read it for you. So I think all of those are really cool options. So if we review our costs to adding our things that you kind of add in, your battery pack, you're looking at $6 through $15. The SD card, $5 through $10 if you don't have one. And your RFID supplies, you could get a few cards and go with that, or you can get a ton. So, about $16 to $50 for that portion. And don't buy a ton of cards to start off with. Figure out what you like and then buy it after. So I'm going to quickly review, before I go on to the modifications, the things that you are going to need around the house. And most of these you should have already because they're very, very common. The tools that you need are soldering iron or spade connectors. A lot of people don't have a soldering iron. Spade connectors pretty much eliminate the need for that. Soldering iron will make your life easier, but if you don't have one, don't worry. If you are going to be using wood, you need a drill and drill bits. No matter what, if you're using plastic or cardboard, you're going to need a craft knife, commonly known as an X-Acto knife. And then for getting the parts securely in your case, you're going to need a hot glue and a hot glue gun. And even if you have the spade bits, you're still going to need wire strippers. Wire strippers, Harbor Freight, easy, only $1. Nothing, you don't need anything expensive. They're super cheap and they're really good to have around. If you don't already have them, there's something to buy. Now, these are the modifications that I'm going to be including and talking about when I go through the next 3 steps. The modifications are really easy because I don't do complicated, and you shouldn't have any problem doing these even if you are a beginner. So the first modification is the radio. These units are called the TEA 5767, and they cost about $12. I found mine for $8 on Amazon rather than eBay, which was a surprise. And I'll go over how to maybe reduce that cost even more. The lit buttons need the extra DuPont cables in Spade, but in general, if you find a deal on buttons for your arcade buttons, really the LEDs don't actually cost that much more. So you're not really going to incur additional cost to have lit up LED buttons. And they do look really cool. But if you're going for something simple, just go for something simple. You don't need light up LEDs. They will add an extra step in putting it together. And then this is something that's probably for the more common, for the more advanced person who does have a soldering ability, because you're going to need to solder the USB power device Now, the nice thing about this is that it's a really clean and quick turnaround to make your device really user-friendly, but it's not necessary. And again, I'm going to be doing this, but there's no need for you to. The easiest way to do this is just to plug in the battery pack directly to the Arduino, and you're good to go. Turning it off by unplugging it, it doesn't hurt it, it doesn't change it. There's really no reason to add a power switch except for the fact that it's kind of nice. So if you look at our cost so far, we're going to add the upgrades, which cost from nothing to about $18. The radio tuner is the most expensive. That unit costs $8 to $12 I've seen commonly. So if this is too rich for your blood, but you really, really, really want to make it and you have time, you can order parts off of eBay directly from China. So if you're ordering from China, when you go into your eBay, you're going to want to select all instead of selecting US shippers only. And you can reduce this quite a bit. The case, obviously, you're not going to get a reduction because that's not really a cheap Chinese part. The electronics, you're actually going to see a significant reduction from about $35 to $50 to $2 to $4 per, $2 to $4 per part rather than $6 to $8. So more than half off. The reusables, your battery and your SD cards and your RFID cards, you're going to get a pretty good discount, but don't buy a rechargeable cell phone battery from China, even if it comes from China. The ones that are in the US already and not bought directly tend to be a lot safer, and especially when you're dealing with something like a lithium battery, just buy it from a US seller, buy it from Amazon. You're a lot safer that way. And then the upgrades, you're going to be looking at under $10 for the upgrades. Your buttons for your toggle buttons are going to probably be significantly cheaper. So that's another thing. But again, the LEDs and the non-LED buttons are not that different in cost. So you can potentially, do this for under $30 if you do no upgrades and you get all China parts, but it's going to be tricky. Realistically, you're looking at around $50 to $60 for this project if you include your reusables. And now, I don't think it's fair to include the reusables in the cost because your battery is something that you could pull out and use for your cell phone. Your SD card, you're going to be reusing all the time anyways. So I would say, in general, the unique parts that you probably never use again, you're looking at $30 to $40, even if you're not ordering from China. So, worth a check. And again, if you have a cheap case. So I just wanted to give you a heads up when, for the next step, we're going to be getting the files and running them. The files that we're going to use are found on GitHub and Bonfried. He has a fork over from the original, and it's important we use this firmware. There is also the Sensfeld audio files, which are going to be the English ones. This is a German project, and the people who do this are from Germany. So we actually have to do a little bit different things using the options that these really amazing people have translated into English. So it's not as straightforward as the original TonUino project. And that's okay because it still is amazingly simple to do. And that is all for your hardware tutorial of how to get it. And if you are looking forward to the firmware, just give a like and we will be updating probably sometime in the future.